Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joni. Thank you all for coming. It's an honor to present to you on this topic. I am so excited about AI, and it seems very appropriate to talk about ChatGPT at this conference because yesterday, David Barrett said every payment is a conversation. And with ChatGPT, someday maybe everything will be a conversation. Please put your questions and comments in the chat. If we don't get to it today or in the session, I'll respond later. I would love to hear what you think. As Joni said, I am a CPA. I have my roots in pre-accounting, as ExpensiCon likes to call it, and bookkeeping. I had a cloud-based bookkeeping firm. I then worked at Armanino as a manager in the outsourced finance and accounting department. I left to work at a couple of accounting tech startups. And while I was doing that, I started a podcast called the Cloud Accounting Podcast. We are the most popular accounting podcast in the world with 1 million downloads. And you can now earn CPE for it with the Earmark app. So if you have a CPE or a CPD requirement and you don't want to sit in a conference room for 8 hours to get your CPE done, download the Earmark app on the App Store and check it out. Get your CPE for listening. You might think this photo was from my days at Armanino in public accounting. It was AI generated. I don't have any photos of myself in a suit these days. I uploaded 25 photos to Secta AI, and it generated that for me. And I have another confession to make. My session description for this presentation was generated 90% by AI. When the call for sessions went out, I thought, oh, I really want to do that, but I was just struggling. I didn't have the time to do it, so I went to ChatGPT, and I said, help me write a session description that I can submit to ExpensiCon that they will accept. And here's the title, and here's a little guideline, and it produced the whole thing. And that's what I submitted. So AI works. We know that. I also asked AI to write a joke for me to kick off this session, because I heard that's a great way to begin any speaking session. And I'm not a comedian. So here's what it came up with. Oh, here's the prompt first. I need a clever joke to open my presentation at an accounting conference in Italy, sponsored by ExpensiCon. And I got this back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here at this prestigious accounting conference, sponsored by ExpensiCon. I must say, I was excited when I heard that ExpensiCon was sponsoring the event. It reminded me of the time when I tried to expense a pizza in Italy. My boss said, you can't expense that, it's too cheesy. But then I showed him the ExpensiCon app and he was speechless, just like the pizza after I ate it. It's a terrible joke. They are all like this. At best, ChatGPT is a dad joke machine, which is great because I have an 8-year-old. But I don't think comedians have too much to worry about at this point. But accountants, apparently we do, because we showed up at the top of a list of occupations with the highest exposure to GPTs in a recent paper by OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT. We are, according to them, 100% exposed. But what does that mean? Does it mean the 100% of our job will be done by AI? Not quite. It means that the time it takes to do 100% of the tasks that we do could be reduced by 50% with GPT-powered software. So think of all the things you do in accounting and auditing, and imagine that the time goes down to 50% or more. And we're not alone. Overall, OpenAI found that about 15% of all worker tasks in the US could be completed significantly faster at the same level of quality when incorporating software and tooling built on top of LLMs. The share increases to between 47% and 56% of all tasks. So like half of everything that everybody does could be automated. But writing jokes isn't one of those tasks. And the reason why tells us something important about generative AI and the limitations of it. So what makes a joke funny? Surprise. It's something unexpected, and that's why you laugh at the punchline. There's delight when your brain forms a new connection. And that's why comedy is very difficult, because it always has to be new. You can't tell the same joke twice and expect people to laugh at it, because the connection has already been formed. GPT, though, it can't be original. It cannot come up with new ideas. It is, by its nature, derivative. It can write, but it isn't a writer. It can create, but it isn't creative. It can tell you a joke, but it will probably be a joke you've heard before, or just a really bad one. And the reason is that GPT is pretty much a sophisticated version of autocomplete. Like when you search on Google, why are accountants? And you get some really interesting results that may explain some of what we're going to talk about in a little bit. Yes, why are accountants paid so little, so unhappy? Important to society, so boring. In demand, unhappy, depressed, quitting, as we will talk about. So GPT-4 is a large language model. It's a type of large language model. Okay, here's how it works. This is the simplest I can explain it. Words and phrases are converted into tokens, which are then placed in a model of all the relationships among those tokens. You can think of it in multi-dimensional space. They're all related together. And based on your input, your prompt, GPT guesses what should come next. And it makes great guesses because it is trained on a massive amount of data. We're talking about the entire internet, every book that's ever been digitized, that sort of thing. And that's the advantage it has over us, because we can only read so many books, listen to so many songs. It takes time, years, decades to build that body of knowledge. But GPT can do this in months. LLMs have access to a massive database. So with that enormous database and the ability to generate new outputs from what it's been given, GPT has become really good at certain tasks. These are just 10 of them. I actually asked GPT to tell me what it was really good at, and it gave me this list. So you know some of them. Content generation, that's a big one. Translation, not just among languages, but from complex to simple. Customer service, email drafting, coding, medical diagnosis. So let's talk about what it's really good at for us, for accountants. And you don't have to take my word for it, because in preparation for this, I spoke with a handful of people who are using ChatGPT now, developers and accountants and auditors, and asked them what they're doing with it. So let's hear from them.
Is this more AI hype, or is this it for real this time?
This is it for real. It's funny, I'm working on my presentation for our Partner Summit here in 2 weeks. And I've got a tradition in the Partner Summit of saying, well, boy, I got that prediction wrong. Or, man, I overestimated that technology. But in this case, there's a little bit of hype for sure, but this is the real deal. This is game-changing.
We've been talking about AI in accounting for a long time. We say it's going to change everything, it's going to take all our jobs, it's going to make the work so much better. And for years and years, it hasn't delivered. How is now different than the past?
It quickly figures things out with very basic prompts. It starts to do them. It starts to follow your instructions. That's not very different from a first-year accounting associate.
I think it's one of those platform shifts, as we say, that internet, personal computer was a big platform shift, then internet, then the smartphone. I believe this is one of those platform shifts.
I started using it in January, and I signed up for GPT-4 the instant it became available. With 4, that was a no-brainer. So the very basic thing you want to do is, I am, you are, I need. Say you are a whatever bot. You are a prompt creation bot. You are a resume creation bot. You are a laundry schedule creation bot. You are a meal planning creation bot, whatever. And I am whoever needs that.
So I am, you are, I need.
That's basic. That is your basic
structure of a prompt.
Right.
So could we say, I am a tax professional. You are tax research bot.
Don't do that.
I need.
Don't do that.
Why not? Why not?
People keep doing that. And then they're coming at me like, this is the most terrible tax research machine I've ever seen. And I'm like, that's not what it is. This is not, Checkpoint. This is not CCH. This is not BNA. This is a bot that has scraped the majority of the internet in order to be able to string together words to respond to you. I don't know where it's been. I don't know if it's how long it hung out on the IRS website.
As a programmer, I've seen my productivity go up 10x. It empowers you to think through the problems. And what's interesting, 50% of the jobs at a Google, Microsoft, Adobe, and I used to work for Adobe, 50 to 60% of the job is looking for the answers on the internet and customize that answer to your scenario, what you're looking for. But now think of it like you have a second brain. You have a co-pilot that you can talk to and it can troubleshoot the problem with you. I'm imagining that in the same thing in the tax ecosystem. So what I'm saying is the tax professional will be 10x more productive and they can get a lot more done in their day with TaxGPT Copilot, even the most complex cases.
A lot of it thus far has been more in the planning phase of things, just getting an understanding of the industry, what are typical industry risks for the company that we're auditing, what are the typical assertions in certain areas, what are some typical fraud risks, what are some other accounting areas that we need to take a look at more specifically and more in depth.
For me, it's no different than having Outlook's applications up on your left-hand side of your desktop, and then on the other side you have your ChatGPT window, right? And as you're going through an audit, a guy like Connor or one of our other people on our team can use it almost as a quasi-senior manager or audit partner to say, hey, I'm going through these particular steps. Can you help coach me or navigate me through things that I should be considering when I'm executing these procedures, right? As opposed to saying, hey, can I talk to you at the end of the day? I have a bunch of questions for you.
ChatGPT is really good at writing API calls against the Sage Intacct API. That's what blew my mind, right? I actually personally wrote most of the API going back quite a ways. And then to go into ChatGPT and ask it, do you know the Sage Intacct API? Can you write some code to do this? And it wrote perfect code. I'm learning Python very quickly by just asking ChatGPT to help me code. So one of the unexpected outcomes from this is how fast I'm able to learn as a result of ChatGPT.
I love that example that Aaron Harris gives there at the end about writing API calls. I mean, think about how that could empower us to move data around without relying on developers to manually build every single connection. We can connect our own apps. So it's very exciting. Let's talk now about the challenges that accounting has and why it needs saving and how AI can help. Did you all see this story in the Wall Street Journal? Was it last year? They've been all over this. The headline is, "Why So Many Accountants Are Quitting. Even some accounting majors don't want accounting jobs." And that's, I believe, Paul Knopp. Is it Knopp? He's the CEO of KPMG. And, I mean, look at this picture. He's got like 3 empty chairs in the 3rd row. Even this guy can't fill a room. And the major stat that got picked up from the story that went all over the internet is that 17% of US accountants and auditors quit the profession between 2019 and 2021. 17%. That's 300,000 accountants and auditors. Was it retirements? Was it younger people changing career paths? It's not clear, but I think it's probably both. What is clear is that we have more open positions than accountants to fill them, probably 2 or 3 times as many. And the problem is that the supply of accounting graduates has plateaued and is decreasing. This is a chart from AICPA's Trends Report in 2021 showing the accounting grads. The lines are not dramatic, but this is a big problem because we're not even keeping up with economic growth. So we're declining. Economic growth, let's say 5% annually, we're going down 5%. We had 17% quit. There's a big gap that's forming, and every year it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is causing real problems. We're starting to see the reality happen, the real problems of the accountant shortage. S&P Global Ratings withdrew ratings for 64 local governments and utility systems in April for failing to file financial information on time. Delwood, Missouri, 64. Delwood, Missouri, a city north of St. Louis with a population of 5,000 and a full-time municipal staff of 11, lost its A rating from S&P. The city administrator said the cause was a backlog of work due to staffing issues at the city's external auditing firm. The audit couldn't get done because the audit firm in that small city did not have enough people. So this is schools not getting built. This is fire stations and police stations not getting built. Nonprofits are starting to be affected. Most nonprofits need audits, and audit firms can't staff engagements. Even one of my favorite NPR podcasts, Marketplace, did a segment on this. I was listening on a jog, and I almost fell over when I heard this. The Washington Post gave it the most apocalyptic spin. The accountant shortage threatens capitalism's future. We are important, I guess, right? I mean, we are the guardians of the capital markets, are we not? And without audits, without taxes getting done, what are we going to do? Talent shortage is so bad that BDO announced they will prioritize hiring offshore in India versus the United States. They have 2,000 people offshore right now. They're going to bring that to 5,000. They employ 12,000, okay? So like this is, if they can't find the people here, they're going to go elsewhere. But it's only going to work for so long because this is a global problem. Here's a story about how the Philippines is facing a shortage of accountants. So you think you're going to solve this problem by offshoring? Well, maybe in 10 years, it's going to be a problem there too. And this has been something that I've been tracking for a few years now. Korn Ferry is a consulting firm that did a study on this in 2021. And they projected that by 2030, demand for skilled workers will outstrip supply, resulting in a global shortage of more than 85 million people. And there's a chart in their report that shows the 2020 situation, where we have, in the yellow countries, a bit of a deficit. We have a surplus in China, in Russia, Mexico, right? And then if we go to 2030, look at the situation. Significant deficit. In China, they don't have enough people. In the US, an acute deficit in Brazil. The only country in the world that will have a surplus of white-collar professionals is India. And the question is that surplus even big enough to satisfy global demand? No. We're short by 85 million people still. Now, that's not just accounting, right? That's across all skilled professions. But we're probably even more affected by it. So this is all very dire, but I think AI can help. So let's look at the other side of the equation when it comes to labor, and that's productivity. If we can increase productivity, we don't need as many workers. And I think it has something to do with this talent shortage. Ask anyone who quit, and you will hear pretty much the same answer. Why did they quit? Burnout. There's too much work, not enough people to do it, and that kind of spirals. Because as you lose people in your firm, the people who are left have more work to do, they get burned out and they leave. So it's accelerating. And why is this? All of this effort over decades to computerize the accounting profession hasn't really made a difference in productivity. But you might be thinking, computers have made a huge difference in my firm. Right? For us, in the world of pre-accounting and bookkeeping and client accounting services, it has. I personally experienced that, where the work that I used to do manually, I could get done in 10, 20% of the time. I was 5, 10 times more effective when cloud accounting became a thing, when apps like ExpensiCon became available to me. But we have to remember that we are a very small part of the accounting profession. We're maybe 10%. 10% of accounting is cash, the rest is tax, the rest is audit, and those folks really haven't seen the benefits. I mean, just go look at how a tax practice operates in most firms, right? Most of them aren't even on workflow software. It's managed with spreadsheets. You might as well be writing it down on paper. So that leads me to the best opinion piece that I've seen yet on how AI will change the work we do. This is by Louis Hyman. He's a historian at Cornell who specializes in the history of labor and technology. This is his beat. And he says that the computer revolution started in the 70s, accelerated in the 90s, but it really hasn't made us all that more productive. And you saw that in that declining labor productivity chart, right? It's because we've just taken these paper-based processes and we've made them digitized, but they're still the same process. Instead of writing down numbers, you're manipulating them in Excel, but there's not really automation going on. It's called the productivity paradox. So in audit and tax, right, we've got tax routing sheets. those sheets that used to be on the outside of a folder, and the folder had all the tax paperwork in it. And as it went, people are nodding their heads, right? Who used tax routing sheets and saw them in their practice, ever? Ever seen them? Yeah. Right, most workflow software, I'm not going to name names, but a lot of tax workflow software is still paper routing sheets. Now it's digitized. Right? Audit documentation. It probably was more efficient in a way when you just had all the paper in a file folder right here that you could just pull things out and get to them quickly. Now instead we've got PDFs and apps like Caseware, and it's hard to find things, harder in a way to find things when it's not paper. And AI is going to finally give us the boost that we've waited for decades. This is a really cool chart here from a study. This study of 444 college-educated professionals gave them a mid-level professional writing task. Half were provided with ChatGPT and half weren't. Half the participants who were given ChatGPT were much, much more efficient. So you can see the green line, pre-treatment, post-treatment. Look at the boost. And then this is the time it took them. So the green bars shows how much faster they were. And then they actually got better grades too. But you don't have to take my word for it. I asked our experts what they think and what they think is possible with AI in the future. Let's take a listen.
So here's my dream, and I know that it's possible. So imagine if you could go into like the B&A portfolios, and instead of having to read all of the portfolios because you don't think it's as fun as I think it is, you start outlining your situation, like your client situation. It asks you questions about it, asks you clarifying questions because it can understand the nuance. And then it helps you pull together all of the resources like that directly address that particular situation, and then helps you write the tax memo about it.
How much time do you think that will save?
Let's say you have a 12-page tax memo. Just doing the research alone, depending on how many different tax issues you have, that could be 40 to 80 hours. I'm not saying that this thing is going to do it for you 100% and you're just going to pass it off, but it's like a very well-educated intern.
How far do you think this technology could go in terms of automating tax compliance?
It can go pretty far, in high 90s.
Like 90%?
Yes, more than 90%. I don't want to say 100%, but very close to 100%, like 97, 98%.
Up till now, like the last 10, 20 years, the real benefit of cloud, accounting, finance, has been all our data is now in a place where we can access it and we can exchange it between systems. And we use rules to automate a lot of that. But the rules are limiting in that you can only set so many up. But now with GPT, we can have these fuzzy rules where I can just say in plain English what I want the AI to do or the bot to do, and it can follow that with a reasonable degree of accuracy. So I don't have to make a rule like only approve expense reports below $10 automatically. I could actually say like only approve immaterial expense reports automatically, and then the AI can understand or can somehow as a model for what immaterial means. Is that the right way to think about this?
My view is actually maybe a little bit more ambitious than that. Why do you need to have approval levels when the AI can just be smart enough to identify when something probably should have a human review? There will be AI agents that learn the business, that take input from the leaders in business, the same way a staff accountant would take input from the manager of the accounting team, and behave following those very high-level job instructions. So I think we're going to start to see a new category of automation technology where, the current sort of state of the art is AI-powered automation, but it's sort of task by task by task. The new generation is going to be AI agents that are taking ownership of a specific workflow or part of the business, and you'll interact with them in much the same way that you would interact with a junior accountant.
If somebody had like a generative AI reading Silicon Valley Bank's 2022 financial statements, would that AI have caught the unrealized losses building on Silicon Valley's balance sheet with those bonds that we all know now, brought down the bank?
Right.
Because they weren't marking them to market, but it was
Right.
it was in the financial statements. Like a tiny little line said, that the losses were like 16 billion or 15 billion, and it was almost all of their equity. And if somebody
Right.
had just scrolled down to page 125, they would have seen it.
I remember as a young auditor looking at audit planning and just being like, Jesus, do we have to read all this? Like, who's going to do all this stuff? Securities filing language hasn't probably evolved. It's probably devolved, right? It's gotten more complex and more complex and more complex and more complex. And so now with the power of something like ChatGPT, it's like, actually, please write my securities filings in plain English.
We're in discussions for the member firm who's going through a PCOB inspection right now. And one of the focus areas was journal entries. And it's one of those areas that is extremely challenging for firms to address. It is always connected to a significant risk related to management override of controls. Well, this particular firm took an extract and there was 22,000 entries that were flagged, okay? There's no human that can literally go through every one of those and say whether those are indicative of fraud or not. But AI, it can do that. And that's just the power of being able to synthesize that data and tell you exactly where to focus. And that's where we're headed. And I think it's exciting to see that we're finally in that spot to where the AI can make sense of this and allow us to then interpret it and focus on the stuff that matters.
So I'm excited because what cloud has done for us, AI will do for the rest of us. I want to show you a little bit of AI that's being built into the tools that we use today. You may have seen that Carbon released AI into their product. It's impressive. Let's take a look.
All right, so here I am inside Triage. The first thing I hope you'll notice if you scan down the right-hand side is the priority labels. So you can see that I've got a couple emails that have come through and automatically been tagged as high priority or low priority. We'll be introducing also a filter list at the top, so you'll be able to quickly filter and see what all of your high priority messages are.
They're analyzing the sentiment.
Now, if I want to action one of these emails,
and the content.
I can open it up. You can see here I've got an email from my client, David Buck, and he's telling me that there's some issues with his billing. And I have the option here, let me just move this around, so you can see there's quite a few messages, is to summarize. By clicking the Summarize button, it provides me again with a bulleted list outlining all of the content that's occurred in the email message.
This works really well.
You can do that on all emails, not just the ones with high priority labels. So I'll give you another example of that. Grab one here. It's another email from another David Buck. My test data, David's been very busy sending me emails. But again, here you can get the other summarized bulleted list. The summary does include comments. It's not just the email messages from your clients or emails between your team members. It will include all of the comments and actions that have occurred within the email conversation. All right, the next use case, the feature I'd like to show you is the email task. So I'm clicking over here to a work item, and I'm going to go over to the task list. And you can see we've got this new email, this new task type, which is called email task. I open it up and it's got a type. So this is the AI prompt type, and you can see there's some prompts in here. So this task is really about letting the client know that the work has started and we expect it to be completed within a week. So I go and I create draft. It's off creating the draft for me. It puts it on the timeline, and you'll see here it's suggesting the client that I should send the email to, John Smith, and it's produced all of the text for me. Again, I can edit this text if I want to change anything, or I can change the tone by using the tone changing feature.
So think about that. Now we can create tasks, repeating tasks, where we don't have to define everything ahead of time. We can create a prompt, and that's the task. And the AI will go do the task based on the prompt and customize the output to the particular situation that we are in. Here's a kind of a wild one. This is a startup called Sterpy. I think they've run out of names on the internet. They are building financial planning and analysis software. they've got a dashboard feature, and they've connected GPT to their tool, and you can now ask in a chat-based way for the tool to do stuff. So let's take a look at what it can do.
Total revenue 4 months ago, December 2022, was 25K.
He's quizzing the data.
So that's just surfacing some KPIs, but we can actually use CFO chat to actually create some graphs. So let's say, create a graph of our total revenue and total expenses. Great, we've got a graph here of our total revenue and total expenses with the data that we provided it, and it's looking accurate here. So if we remember, we asked it, what was March revenue, 91K. We're seeing that we got March revenue, 91K. And these graphs, you can add these graphs over to your live dashboard views in sterpy Plus. Be able to view it there. We're soon going to add the ability to kind of send this data to Google Sheets or Google Slides if you want to include this. But let's say maybe you wanted this in a bar chart and don't want to look at it as a line chart. So we could say, change that graph to a bar chart. And great, just like that, now we've got a bar chart of our total revenue, total expenses, same data as before, just.
So you can now create charts, graphs, visualizations in his tool using chat. That's coming to Excel. Microsoft invested $10 billion in OpenAI, and they are actively building that, and we're going to start seeing it this year. I wanted to show you a little behind-the-scenes peek of ExpensiFi's concierge. This is actually what it looks like on the back end when they're chatting with you. And you can see on the right-hand side, let me play this, that every time a chat comes in, the customer service agent gets a selection of responses, like pre-canned responses that they can then select and place into the chat. So that's an example of ExpensiFi already using automation that's only going to be juiced up even further by GPT, because now it's not pre-canned, it's going to generate them on the fly, and the agent just selects the most appropriate answer and customizes it for the user. And this is what has allowed ExpensiFi, this type of automation is what has allowed ExpensiFi to scale to become a very, David Barrett is very modest, he says they're a small company, but they're a pretty big company with only 144 employees in 2022, as I understand it, right? And that's going to be available to us as accountants. So, that's my theory. I think AI is going to make accounting great, and you heard little bits and pieces of it in the videos. It's more than just about filling the talent gap. That's important, right? But we also need to think about, why do we have a shortage of accountants? Why did those 17% of accountants and auditors quit? And honestly, I think it's pretty simple. It's because there's a lot of BS in our profession. There's a lot of manual work. There's a lot of regulatory crap that we have to do. You look at financial statements of publicly traded companies, for instance, and they are hundreds of pages long. And people are making that, and nobody is reading them. Really, I'm convinced that nobody read Silicon Valley Bank's financial statements. And actually, if you look at the number of downloads on the SEC's website for financial statements, a typical 10K filing is only downloaded a few dozen times at most. It's because they're just not useful. The complexity has increased and the utility has decreased. But AI can solve this without us having to wait for the regulators to wake up or for some catastrophe to make that happen, because we can feed all of this legalese and these long documents into AI, and it can simplify them. It can write them in plain English and help us understand what we're missing. It can take 22,000 journal entries and tell us which ones we actually, as auditors, need to look at. Because we also know audit quality is a massive problem, and people don't value audits the way they used to. So I think it can solve that problem. Here's a quick 2-minute video of our panelists here talking about the future and what you should do.
Back in the 90s, if you don't know Excel and Word and Office and email, you were phased out of the job market very fast. So AI is one of those tools. I encourage everyone to use it. and work on it. And it's going to make us more productive. It's going to create new opportunities that does not even exist yet. Just play around with those tools and don't come from the place of fear, but the place of excitement.
The people that learn these tools, learn how to use them effectively, those are the ones that are going to outpace their peers in terms of performance and in terms of their firm, and also in terms of their careers. I think there will be growing pains for sure, but ultimately I think the benefits of AI, the stuff that we've all talked about forever, is it'll do it faster, it'll do it better, and it won't complain. Right?
So that's the advice I give to everybody. Embrace it. I have it in a window by me all day long. And whenever I think of I'm not sure what that means, or I'm not sure how to do that, I just I just type it into ChatGPT. So the advice is to embrace it.
Hopefully it would allow us to actually use these brains for something that is fulfilling and brings us joy and lets us go and have hobbies because we're not at the office all the time. I think as tax professionals, we forget that we are not just tax return slingers. Here's tax return for you, here's tax return for you, here's tax. That is actually not our best and highest use as professionals. As professionals, our highest and best use is providing client service and guidance and supporting our clients in the way that they need it. And tax compliance is such a small part of that because it is a huge pain in the behind. But there is so much more to a business or to an individual than just this tiny part that's considered tax compliance. We get a chance to expand again and go back to being that trusted professional that people come around and just sit in our office and talk for an hour, and we get to go to their kids' games, and we get to the way that we are as a profession right now. Are we really building those relationships? Because we're so strung out, so stressed out, so stretched. We get to do that again. So that's so exciting.
Thank you so much to Aaron Harris and Caleb Newquist, Kashif Ali, Ashley Francis, Connor Murdoch, and Chris Vanover for speaking with me and sharing their stories. If you liked this presentation and you want to hear more of it, every week you can listen to the Cloud Accounting Podcast, and you can earn free CPE for listening to it and many other podcasts, including Caleb Newquist's show, Oh My Fraud, Chad Davis's podcast. I think we have some Automation Town episodes in there. We might. Yes. You can find it on the App Store. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions.
Hi, Blake. Michael from Xero. I'm not an accountant myself, but I thought that was an incredible session. One thing I wanted to get your opinion on, there was a lot of chat there about ChatGPT or AI tools doing the job of kind of a well-trained intern. Mm-hmm. As you get interns into the business and are training them up, a lot of the tasks that you might give them are so that they can get better and learn. If you're giving those tasks or you're using kind of AI tools to do those tasks, how would you foresee that changing, I guess, kind of the onboarding for an intern as they come into the accounting profession?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because the challenge of education is, that's the question, is how do we train staff if we don't have a need for them anymore, right? What they were doing before. And it's not just interns, right? It's staff accountants. What if the shape of an accounting firm changes such that it's no longer a pyramid, but it's a diamond? Where do young students go to learn if they don't learn in practice? So I think education is going to have a massive shift, right? Classroom education has to completely change. I'm doing my small part of that, or aiming to, with Earmark as a continuing education platform. Maybe we can help fill that gap. But yeah, I don't actually have an answer to that. I think that's a big problem.
Hi, this was more to answer him. You and I were having dinner last night, and we were talking about this education issue. And I run a firm of about 100 people or so, and the issues that we face are exactly that. Like, how do we train people when they're coming out of school or they're coming into a new firm? So this September, we're actually launching a certification for accounting technology and bringing people the opportunity to learn tools like this, APIs, databases, and things like that. And it's just one small step to see if we're able to help new accountants and staff that aren't firm owners and have access to all the extra CPD. So with Earmark and something like this, it could be pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to figure out how to fill it, how to train those people. But I mean, maybe ChatGPT can do that if you've seen Khan Academy or if you've used it to train yourself, right? Like you might not need to go to school anymore to learn how to do things. Amazing. Actually, me standing up here and presenting one directionally to you, that might go away. We just chat with our personal tutor.
Yeah. Just in response to that, there's a study that was done by Eric Brynjolfsson, who is an AI researcher at Stanford, and he studied a call center that implemented AI, and employee onboarding was actually one of the things that was most positively impacted. Like, it reduced the amount of time required to onboard a new employee by a ridiculous percentage. So I'm actually pretty optimistic about AI's capabilities for getting new employees up to speed, because you can essentially take a download of the most knowledgeable employee and then create a chatbot out of that a new employee can talk to. So I think that's going to be amazing, but one of the things that I'm scared about, or I think is potentially a big problem for the industry, is just the downward cost pressure or pricing pressure that this will create.
Oh yeah, this is the death of the billable hour.
Totally.
Think about it. Your work gets cut in half.
Totally.
You can't double your rate.
Yeah, if an AI can do 90% of the work, then there's going to be an AI firm that charges 90% less potentially to do it. So I don't know if you've had any conversations with people about that, or I'm just curious to get your thoughts.
I mean, I feel like it's going to be a net benefit. I experienced this with my bookkeeping firm. I automated my own job. I could do, I automated 80% of my job. I had to stop billing hourly. I switched to fixed fees. My customers got more, and I did less. And I ended up splitting it with them essentially, and my effective hourly rate went up 5 times. So I think that'll happen with us too. It's going to be painful though, right? Because if people don't switch, they're going to suffer the consequences. Yeah.
We got 1, 2, 3.
I actually tried to get AI to help me pad my timesheet, see if it would do it. It's unethical. It wouldn't do it for me.
So my question, and not being in this industry, but here's a +1, I'm very interested in AI and how it can affect any industry across the board. Being in the legal profession, I can see some applications.
Oh yeah, already.
But not having had, I'm still a bit of a dinosaur. I've been practicing 42 years and I'm kind of halfway out the door. But not having ever worked with any version of ChatGPT or any AI-based software other than some of the Boolean searches for legal research that came along as I was coming out of law school and have improved ever since. Where's a good place for someone like me with no experience working with any AI format to get some experience and to explore how this particular tool might be of benefit in my life and in my profession?
Well, the legal profession is a great place to be with AI right now. There's startups that have built plugins for Microsoft Word already that will analyze a document and bring out the key salient points for you as an attorney. I would say just take a contract and drop it into ChatGPT and ask questions about it.
That's just an open source online.
Yep. So it's chat.openai.com, is it? AI.com. Okay, go to AI.com and you can sign up for free for the version 3, and you pay $20 a month for version 4, which is worth it. And you can drop stuff in there and start asking questions about it. It's great for any text-based documents. The reason that accountants have suffered, or not suffered, but disillusioned by it is because a lot of our data is structured. And it's actually impressive. You can copy paste from a spreadsheet into ChatGPT, and it can figure out based on the tabs what you originally had and do analysis, but it doesn't do math. It's not a calculator. It only gets math problems right by accident in a way. So you can't, people are asking tax calculation questions, and it's just not the right tool for that. but it will be. And that's what guys like Cash, who's building Tax GPT, is working on. He's creating a language model specifically trained around the IRS, the state tax codes, the rulings, all that, that you can quiz and you can ask questions of. And I'm sure it will also have a calculator.
Thank you so much. My name is Kiran Bhutani. I've been in education for more than 30 years. I'm professor of mathematics at Catholic U, and
you were on that list too, 100%
right.
at risk.
So we are so worried in education about this because as it is in last 10 years, there were so many new tools that students, especially those who need to learn the basics, they would wonder, why am I learning all that when I have a tool to do this? And we are saying you need to know the basic so that if your tool gives a wrong answer, you have an idea where you went wrong. Now with ChatGPT, and then you asked, how do we train students when they graduate? So that's something we are looking at in the university. How do we train our students before they graduate so they are better prepared? But the big question I have is, how do we figure out where is it good to train in ChatGPT, where it is good not to train? Because I showed my students, as you just said, it cannot do calculation. I put in a question just for fun. It gave a wrong answer. I saved it, stored it, showed to my whole class. Don't follow ChatGPT blindly. You need to be very careful. So the question is, I wish I could ask this question, ChatGPT, and compare with your answer. But the thing is that how do we evaluate whether what ChatGPT is doing, to what accuracy? How does ChatGPT evaluate itself? Is there a tool for that?
It doesn't right now, right?
Nice.
But
thank you.
So if you use the API to connect to GPT, not using the chat tool, you can specify accuracy versus creativity. And so you can set a very low threshold or a very low value for the hallucination that it might do. And then it will not give you, it will do its best not to give you an incorrect answer. You can't eliminate it completely, I don't think. But I mean, what if you had a GPT that produced an answer and then you had another one that evaluated that answer and gave you a probability of how accurate it is? So it's not about being 100% accurate. We all know this in accounting, right? It's not about tying things out to the penny. So we just have to get to what is acceptable error. Now in math, there may not be an acceptable amount of error. But I think it's a great tool right now for like a tutor. Think of it like a tutor. You can ask it questions about how do I approach this problem, maybe ask it like how have other mathematicians in the past approached these problems, and it can guide you in that way. Not really solve the problem though, necessarily. Oh, sorry, I know I'm not calling on people. People have microphones. Sorry.
You've already mentioned one pitfall. Are there any other, really, for a newbie in the space, trying to utilize it? Is there other pitfalls that you're like, yeah, just don't try to get it to do this?
Pitfalls. I'd actually be curious to know, Chad, if you have any pitfalls that because you've actually been using it, I think, even more than I have.
If you're just starting out, try not to put too much of your client's personal information.
Yes. So that's
in the chat model itself.
Yes.
So you can just run an anonymized for it and scrub it out. Yeah.
That's the number one thing from a security perspective. If you use ChatGPT, the terms of service say that OpenAI can use whatever you put into it to train the model. You're basically giving them that, and they'll anonymize it and whatnot. It's not, but still, be careful what you put in there.
Just be open to other uses, right? Like coming down the pipe is Microsoft's Azure, and that's what Carmen's using. So just kind of be aware of what's out there, and that's a lot more secure for something.
When it rolls out in the Microsoft products, that's when it's going to take off like crazy because it's secure, and that, they've already got all our data, right? I mean, yeah.
So what do you foresee for the accountants? Do you think that jobs will still be there? I know it's already declining, but just to save the cost, if startup starts using ChatGPT for their accounting, do you think that might happen in the future? And or do we need accountants anymore?
So I didn't have time to play it in this presentation. I took it out, but I had a clip in here from the the podcast All In. It's the #1 tech podcast in the world. Those guys were talking about this in January, about like using GPT to automate accounting and like financial statement preparation. Like it's going to happen. I think that it could very well, reduce the need for accountants by 90%. I mean, one accountant could be a 10x accountant, right? The same way we have now 10x engineers. But that's great for those of us who are in this room.
What time frame are you?
Microsoft's going to roll this stuff out this year. I think we will see ERPs. I mean, I was talking with Aaron Harris in those videos. He's the CTO of Sage. He's on this. Like, they're going to roll this out into their ERP systems. So I would not be surprised if you had chat-based agents in the next couple of years where they've completely look at the new Expensify versus the old Expensify. It's basically that. Expensify's they've had the vision years before this even became a possibility. Everything's going to be a chat first. And then you can go behind the scenes and see that complicated UI. But you're going to be able to do most of it by talking with an agent, a virtual AI. Our lives are going to change in a dramatic way, especially when Siri is smart. Can you imagine just walking around and talking to your phone and asking it to take care of all of your personal tasks? It will be like having a personal assistant just with you at all times. I mean, people might not even email each other anymore because your personal assistant, like if you're a high-flying executive, will just read them to you and ask how you want to respond.
The iOS app was released this week with Whisper, so you can talk to the ChatGPT app.
You can talk to ChatGPT with Whisper?
Through the iOS app.
Through the iOS app. It's called Whisper?
Whisper's the technology behind voice that you can chat into the app.
Okay. That's exciting. I can't wait for that.
So as AI, at some point is going to reach in terms of usage saturation, do you think there's a risk of having like a closed loop of thinking in the sense that, everybody's using AI to generate content and so forth,
yep.
And there's going to be less new creative ideas, and is that going to spur maybe like a think tank, groups or something like that where they're creating new ideas and putting it there? Otherwise, it's just going to be a closed loop.
I mean, so the internet's kind of already that way, where there's just like a lot of crap out there, right? A lot of just like SEO generated content to get Google's attention. And this is just going to get worse before it gets better. But I think that, it's going to be better in the end. Because it'll be better for people who are creative thinkers. If you have original ideas, AI can make you a 10x person in anything you do, because you can just give it the idea, and it's like having a team that goes out and writes my session description for me, something I would have struggled with for hours. I could just have a good idea of the title, make it, right? So I think if you are creative, if you have original thoughts, it's great. If you don't, you're going to be in trouble. And that's where education has a problem, because traditional education is about transmitting information one way from a professor to the students, who then regurgitate the information. It's been done that way for hundreds of years. This is changing things such that we need like a Socratic method of education. People need to learn to ask questions, not repeat answers. And in accounting, we don't do that in general. Good programs do that, but most don't. Lawyers do that. Law school does that. We could learn from law school.
Hi, thanks for the session, and it's great to get information about you, but beyond that, do you have any thoughts about where we should look to get information on disruptive AI companies that are coming out? It's just happening so quickly, and I do listen to the All In podcast. That's very interesting on a big picture level, but do you have any direction that you can point us in?
So one thing you can do now is you can download the Microsoft Edge browser, and Bing now it's connected to the search engine. Bing is now connected to ChatGPT. So you can go in there every now and then, you can say like, hey, what's the latest developments in AI? Give me the top 5 stories. Use AI to learn about AI. Just like you've put it on your second screen, buy another screen just for it if you need it, and just keep it up all day, and every time you have a question, ask. But if you want current events, you got to use Bing, or you got to use the Google product or what? Bard. Yeah, you got to use Bard or Bing. Yeah, because the OpenAI is trained on a data set that's 2 years old. So, but they're releasing plugins that will search the internet. I don't have access to it yet, but I know some people do. And so it can go out and find stuff for you, and it can go do stuff for you. It's all going to be very exciting.